Tennessee State linebacker Monroe Beard has entered the transfer portal for the second year in a row. And after starting his collegiate career with 2 HBCUs, I don't believe that we'll be seeing Mr. Beard again. Oh, yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make it Locked On HBCU, your first listen of the day, every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter. At South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. And right now, new customers will get $150 back in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 back in bonus bets as long as you put down a bet, win or lose. Go to FanDuel.com/locked on. We'll wrap up today's episode with Alabama State knocking off Auburn in baseball. This is their first Power 5 victory in 8 years. Prior to that, at my declaration that I prepared yesterday, I believe that track and field is the quickest and best way for HBCUs to gain national acclaim. But we kick this off with a massive blow for the Tennessee State defense. Monroe Beard III has entered the transfer portal, and I do not believe that he will be returning to any HBCU, despite starting off at UAPB and then going to Tennessee State. So this is the second year in a row that he entered the portal. He came over to Tennessee State just last season from UAPB, and now he's back in the portal again. Unless he retracts his name and stays at Tennessee State, I don't believe that an HBCU is in his future. I don't, and I'll unpack that a little bit more as we get on with the segment. But I first want to break down why this is such a massive loss, because I feel like, why do you care if he doesn't go to another HBCU unless you truly understand the talent that Monroe Beard is? And in 9 games last year for Texas Southern, for Tennessee State, he had 95 tackles, 4 tackles for a loss, 1 interception, and 5 pass breakups. He was also a first team all Big South/OVC player. So Beard had less tackles for a loss and sacks than he did in his UAPB breakout year, because he broke out at UAPB and then he transferred to Tennessee State. And I bet it probably felt good for him to beat UAPB in a Southern Heritage Classic this year. But he broke out at UAPB and he had more tackles for a loss, 8.5 tackles for a loss. He had 5 sacks. This year, he didn't have any sacks. This past season, he only had 4.5 tackles, or 4 tackles for a loss. So it was a drop-off, but it wasn't, in my opinion, because of anything he did wrong. Yes, he played 2 less games, and that probably played a part in the gap being as wide as it was. I don't know if he would have gotten any sacks in those 2 extra games. Maybe he had a tackle for a loss, maybe 2 extra tackles for a loss. Who knows, right? But that gap still would have existed. It's just about how wide of a margin that it would have been. But I can't blame the time that he had off, because his tackles skyrocketed. He went from 78 tackles to 95 tackles, and that was 10th in the FCS for most tackles per game in 2023. But I think the reason that his tackles skyrocketed and the reason that his tackles for a loss/sacks kind of dropped a little bit, they're both connected to the same reason. Tennessee State had a really good defensive line. A good defensive line will allow your linebacker to flow And when your linebacker is able to flow and he doesn't have to worry about offensive linemen coming up to the second level and trash being all in his face, when he can just flow and read and react, he's going to get more tackles. A good defensive line frees up your linebacker to increase his tackle output. But a disruptive a disruptive defensive line doesn't really allow him to get many tackles for a loss or sacks because they're too busy doing that, right? So like both, that's what Tennessee State was. They were a good disruptive defensive line, and it starts off with Terrell Allen, the Buck Buchanan Award winner. In my opinion, the guy who should have been the Black College Football National Player of the Year. But this is a disruptive talent, the best defensive player in the nation in 2023. Yes, when you have a guy like him leading the charge, it's going to be difficult for your linebacker at the second level to get as many tackles for a loss. That's just the fact of the matter. But one thing he did do to supplant his disruptive stats, as I like to call them, he got an interception. He got 5 pass breakups. He didn't have 5 pass breakups in his entire career coming into 2023. But now that we understand the talent that Monroe Beard III is, why do I believe that he's no longer coming back to an HBCU? First off, he was UAPB first. He was a all-SWAC second team player. Then he hit the portal. Then he went to Tennessee State, and he was an all Big South OVC player of the year, all Big South OVC first team player. Now you went from second team to first team. But it's not even so much that he is checking off the boxes. Everywhere he's going, he's hitting that dominating factor. He's saying, I'm one of the best players in my position in every single conference that I go to. So those are impressive check marks. But if we had to look at the imaginary ladder, and that ladder is always connected to draft stock. If we hear what a lot of people say, Monroe Beard is climbing up each individual rank. He started off at an HBCU conference, right? He's played at 2 HBCUs, but he started off in an HBCU conference. In the SWAC, we know how people look at the SWAC. So you did that. Boom. I had an all SWAC second team on my resume. That's cool. I'm going to go ahead and go to Tennessee State. Still an HBCU, but it's in a PWI conference. Oh, see, now that's a step up in competition, air quotes being put on there, right? Like, we're just speaking about perception. I go in there, I'm an all Big South OVC player. So I'm a back-to-back all-conference player. But not only that, I leveled up in this PWI conference that gets a little bit more respect. And I was a first team as opposed to a second team. So now I think he's going to level up and go to another bigger conference. The CAA is an option. I rule out North Carolina A&T and Hampton. I kind of feel like I shouldn't rule out A&T because A&T was only there for a year. And though they weren't good last year, I don't know if that's going to be enough to say I want to go to a better program. Because North Carolina A&T was good a year ago in the Big South. It's just that they didn't follow it up in their first year in the CAA. But I would say in general, Beard has went HBCU conference, went to another HBCU in the PWI conference. If I'm following his steps, right, and I'm looking at the guy who has climbed each individual rung, I'm saying he's going to go to a PWI next. That's just what I would say, and I don't think anything was wrong at Tennessee State. I think he's probably just trying to maximize exposure and value. Okay, I understand what he's going. It kind of feels like he's collecting badges. I don't think that's what he's doing. I don't think he's actively saying, okay, I've done this, check, I can go now. But I do think that now that he's done it and I've seen the progression of him, naturally, as a guy trying to improve his draft stock, he would think the next move is to go to some other PWI conference. So, unfortunately, I don't think that we see Monroe Beard in another HBCU jersey, despite how talented that he is. I wish him the best of luck because I like the guy. I ain't gonna lie to you. So, as we push forward, we're talking about draft stock. That's a form of national acclaim. The want to the desire to go somewhere else and feel like I gotta boost my stock because it's more respected here is a form of national acclaim. So let's go ahead and keep in that kind of umbrella and look at track and field because I think that's where HBCUs can really get their national acclaim. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime, and Gametime is the best place for all of your last-minute ticket deals. There's no such thing as procrastination kills when you're on Gametime. I don't care if you're looking at comedy shows. That's fine. I like to laugh. concerts. I was talking to somebody the other day about a concert that's going to be coming into the area in June. Football events, basketball events. The NBA is coming around with their playoffs next week. So maybe you have a playoff team in your local area and you want to go support, or maybe you just want to go check out playoff basketball, regardless of if that's your team or not. All of these things can be found on the Gametime app. And if you find a better price in the same row, same section, they'll pay you 110% back on the difference. All you have to do is download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code Locked On College. Remember, it is Locked On College. We switched it up, so let me say it one more time. Locked On College to get $20 off your first purchase. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day for your second listen. Make sure you're checking out Locked On Sports Today, the first of its kind 24/7 live sports network on YouTube. Go to Locked On Sports Today. Say the whole thing. That's Locked On Sports Today and subscribe. I know. We've had the conversation about national acclaim, and I understand that it's like, part is like, man, it don't even matter because we're not receiving it. But what would be the sport that is the easiest to gain that national acclaim? I don't think it's easy anywhere, but the easiest to me is track and field. I understand that basketball is looked at because you have the NCAA tournament. It's on a main stage. I get it. Basketball is closer to national acclaim than football is, but I think that track and field is actually the one. And that's because track and field has an advantage that nobody else has. Strength of competition is irrelevant in this sport. You're only competing against the clock. I don't care if I ran I'm gonna use it in 40-yard dash time because I don't want to say the wrong time, but I'll just use it 13:39, right? Because we have a runner who ran a 13:39 in the 110 hurdles. That's third in the nation. It doesn't matter that he goes to Howard. It doesn't matter that, let's say I ran that time and it was Maryland Eastern Shore, Norfolk State, North Carolina Central, and Coppin State. Like, let's just say it's a MEAC Invitational. Did those 110 meters all of a sudden shrink? Did those lanes all of a sudden change size, right? If I'm throwing a discus, did my discus get lighter? Those things didn't happen. Strength of competition is not a thing in track and field, as opposed to football, where I can run for 200 yards. We say, look at who you did it against. That doesn't exist in track and field. So let's get into the comparison. Let's get into the rankings. In football, it's not happening. Not anytime soon. They will take a big cultural shift for it to be in football, because the truth of the matter is folks only really care about the Power Five. The whole FBS isn't even something that people care about. So now let's get into basketball, because when it comes to basketball, yes, I can have a Jackson State be good year in and year out, and they can be a 14 seed. But the reason they aren't a higher seed is because I need 4 or 5 teams in my conference to be good. To me, that's more difficult because it's not solely in your control. Having multiple teams be good in your conference is more difficult than getting a track and field program to being respectable, because I think all you need there is a specialty. Howard has good sprinters. If they can say that about 2-3 different schools, hey, Howard has good sprinters. Texas Southern, they're good with long distance. North Carolina A&T, they're great with hurdles, right? Like maybe field events over there at Tennessee State is a strong suit for them. If you can get those things said about 2 to 3 HBCUs, now you're building national acclaim. If I can just say these schools have a specialty in that, I think that we're satisfied. I would be satisfied. I'll say that, right? Now, the question becomes, A, are you satisfied? But then also, B, how do we do that, right? Like, I can sit here and I can tell you that it's easier to get national acclaim as a track and field program, but it is in no way easy. I called my friend today because I said, hey, man, I don't want to speak out of turn. One thing about me is I'm real. Like, I know where my strong suits are, and I know where my weaker points are. So I called my friend, hey, man, and we just talk about track and field for 40 minutes, right? And we just spoke about the landscape and the things. And one of the things that he said, hey, if you want to be an elite program, you got to have this. You got to have standout athletes, maybe NCAA winner, maybe a runner-up. a notable Olympian on your staff. Obviously, you have to have good coaching, got to have a specialty. That's a lot. That's a lot. And I don't know how many programs are close to that. But if I can get a couple of strong 100-meter sprinters, 200-meter sprinters, if I can get a couple strong distance runners, maybe if I can get some discus, if I can get some shot put, some triple jump, like these things, if I can get a couple of those, then I can snowball it. And maybe I can consistently get people in those events. And after a while, I believe that if I can get a couple of strong 100-meter runners, I can get a couple of strong distance runners and put them in the NCAAs, right? You got to qualify for NCAAs at the end of the year. As long as you're not doing that, you won't be respected. That's just the truth of the matter. But if I can put that out, and maybe you're not elite, but you're a respectable program, and people can say you do this well, I think that's national acclaim. I think that would be considered there. Even if you're not elite, look at it like FBS. You know how I said nobody really cares about anything but the Power Five? That's true to an extent. But the Group of Five does have a couple of teams like, oh, yeah, UCF. What UCF used to be Group of Five. Now they're Power Five. They went to the Big 12. But you have schools in the Group of Five distinction that people know. They get drafted. They get acknowledged. They're not looked at like FB. They're not looked at like the FCS, but they're also not looked at like the Power Five. I think that that's a solid place. And to me, that is national acclaim. Would you be okay with that? Would you be okay with people saying HBCU, a couple of HBCUs, hey, man, they really solid. HBCUs do put out some solid track and field teams, because I don't hear that about basketball. I don't hear that about football. The other question is, kind of always said the only question, but the other question is the lane big enough? Do we care enough? Like when I say, are you okay with that? It's a true question. Are you okay with people saying HBCU's got some solid track teams? They put out a couple of solid track teams. Are you satisfied? Not okay. Are you satisfied with that? Because we all know we want the acclaim in the biggest sports, and that's football and that's basketball. It maybe not be track and field. That lane may not be the one that can be the widest, right? Like that might not be the lane that grows to everybody. But within that lane, I think that's the lane HBCUs can go the farthest. So that's my opinion on it. I would love to know what you think. Send us to your favorite track and field viewer. Let them know. I want to know what everybody thinks. Let me know what the track and field community feels about this, because I want to talk. Educate me. If you feel like I'm speaking a tad bit out of turn on this. And if you agree, let me know you agree. Track and field, basketball, football. That's how I look at it when we're talking about the sports that we can get national acclaim in the fastest. But let's look at baseball, because for the second time in a week and a half, we've seen an HBCU knock off an in-state Power 5 in baseball. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and FanDuel is the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. And now it's almost time for the NBA playoffs. I think the Clippers and the Suns maybe play tonight, if I'm not mistaken. So that's for my Pelicans. I'm hoping that my Pels can get a 6 seed, so we ain't got to worry about the stinking play-in. But if you think that's going to happen, go ahead and go to FanDuel. If you think Zion going to drop 30 again, if you think you're going to have more blocks than they project them, go ahead. Live in same game parlays. You have live game betting. You have before the game. All of these things are a part of it. It's on you to go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. And if you're new to FanDuel, you've been waiting until the NBA playoffs to really get invested, then all you have to do is put down any bet, and you'll get $150 back in bonus bets. It's that easy. It's that simple. We want you to win. So go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to make every moment more. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. We wrapped up track and field national acclaim. We kicked this thing off with a little bit of look at Monroe Beard III and his decision to leave Tennessee State. Massive blow for the fake TSU Tigers. But now what about Alabama State? Because they just knocked off Auburn in men's baseball. They just knocked off Auburn in baseball. And the HBCU is knocking off in-state powerhouses is something I can get with. That's something I can get down with. First, you had the Battle of BR, and that went on to Southern, who knocked off LSU in LSU's home stadium for the first time in nearly 20 years. Now you have Alabama State knocking off Auburn. This is their first victory over an SEC Power 5 team since 2016, right? Like any Power 5 school, any SEC school. This is their first victory in 8 years. This is massive. This is massive. Now, they won in different ways. With Southern, the bats were alive. The bats were jumping. Like with Southern, they put up 12. In this game, Alabama State put up 3. The final score was 3-2. So this is a completely different victory or style of victory. And pitching was very strong to begin. So you had Christian Herberholz for Auburn. I do not envy people having to say that name. I thought I practiced a couple times, so I had to say it on live, huh? Thought I practiced a couple times, so I had to say it live. Yeesh. But that was the pitcher who came out from the beginning. And he pitched 5 innings to start the game, shut down. Bama State wasn't getting nothing. But the same could be said for Alabama State, because obviously they held Auburn to only 2 runs the entire game. Auburn got a run in the 4th, and then they got a run at the beginning of the 9th, the bottom of the 9th, right? But for the most part, this was really good pitching. I think Auburn had 5 hits on the day, if I'm not mistaken, 5 hits. I know Alabama State only had 8. It was 8-5, if I'm not mistaken, on the hit count. Like, this was strong pitching from both teams. But once Alabama State did come alive, once Alabama State did start making contact, that's when their offense hit kind of a groove. So you had a run in the 7th, a run in the 8th, a run in the 9th. And I don't mean run like, you know what I'm saying, maybe you're not a baseball guy. You're not a baseball girl. Maybe more basketball. I don't mean run like they went on a 20-7 run. No, I mean they had a home run 2 times, and then they also had another run scored. And really, you can look at Ali LaPread, because LaPread was a guy who he has the most home runs. He has the most home runs in the conference, and his first score was a home run in the 7th. He put Alabama State on the board, and he brought in 2 of the 3 runs. So yes, you had Alabama State, you had him knocking the first run, and that was a home run. It was the first at bat too. It was the first at bat in the 7th inning. It was a full count, so he had 3 balls, 2 strikes, and he swung because he had to, right? You got to swing at the full count. Home run, and I feel like that was the jump start. And it wasn't rapid. It wasn't just boom, 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 boom. But the offense did begin to continue going. So you get a run in the 8th, and then LaPread came back in the 9th inning, and he scored the most important run, because that was the one that actually clinched them the victory. And that was thankful to an Auburn error, because Auburn had an easy out coming up, and that was going to be the end of the inning, and it would have been 2-1. But because they did have the error, LaPread was able to go ahead and get in and score. The runner was able to make it to first. And now you're looking at a 3-1 lead going into the bottom of the 9th, as opposed to a 2-1 lead. And that gives you a little bit of breathing room. And because you had that breathing room, you could deal, because they came out and they swung and they knocked it a nice line drive triple up the right side of the field. And now you have Auburn in scoring position on third base with no outs. The next run or the next at bat, immediately sack fly. Immediate sack fly. So now you go ahead and you bring it in. Now we're getting concerned, because you then walk somebody. Now we got a guy on first. He's still second. He's in scoring position. And that's something that Alabama State did really well this game, is they had 6 times, because remember, it wasn't a lot of hitting, right? Like, it wasn't a lot of it. It was really good pitching and fielding. But 6 times Auburn had a runner in scoring position. Only one time did they score, and that was that sack fly. That was off the sack fly that I just mentioned at the beginning of the bottom of the ninth. So you got to give credit to Alabama State. Good pitching, really strong pitching. And that last run by LaPread is what took them over the top and allowed them to secure that victory. Small margin of error. But when you see those type of things, it's little plays like LaPread's final run that truly make a difference. So shout out to Alabama State's pitching. It was strong. They won the game in a different way than the Southern Jaguars did, but they won the game nonetheless, and it stopped a little bit of a skid for the Hornets. So we'll see if that allows them to play with a little bit more confidence going into conference play a little bit better, and have more victories. So I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. Tomorrow we'll be looking at FAMU spring game because it's over this weekend, and I cannot wait. So I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. Until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.